Hey everybody, it's me, your friend Terry with the dronecav. I hope everybody's doing well. Welcome to October. Well, we're halfway through October. Welcome to the middle of October. And boy, isn't this our month. I mean, Halloween. We've got so much cool stuff going. So many horror movies, parties. I mean, fun stuff. You know, you got to be safe and all that stuff in these days and times and all that. But it's an exciting time of year. I mean, the leaves are turning for you folks in those areas. Here in Florida, everything looks about the same. It's getting a little bit cooler though. But boy, do we have a beautiful day today. Gorgeous day. A little warm, but the sky is blue. Got some puffy clouds. Very little wind. I mean, this is like a picture perfect day to fly drones. But it's just amazing. So I hope it's amazing where you live too. But anyway, I want to talk about a really cool thing today, a really cool drone. And this comes from talking to a lot of you that are kind of starting to get into flying and exploring it and learning about some models. And I love the questions because I'm getting the kind of common question: what should I start with? Where should I get going with a drone? I saw this one for $35 on Amazon. Is it going to be good enough to learn? The answer is probably no, because the cheaper drones you kind of get what you pay for in a lot of respects. I mean, just being brutally honest, really cheap drones, and there are a zillion different ones out there, tend to be aimed at like the toy type class and all, which is cool. I mean, that's fine, you know, something for the kids to play with. But we're on more of a professional side than that. And we talk a lot about more professional cameras, more capable drones, things that can handle wind, things that fly well, things that are dependable, reliable, things that have good cameras. I mean, all that stuff is important. But where do you draw the line when you've got a budget to work with? You know, you don't have this bottomless pit of money, and you're wanting to start something new that could very well end up, you know, you could crash it, let's be honest. But being careful and all that, I mean, that goes a long way to preventing accidents like that. But something that you're not going to have a huge investment to get started with, but is still good quality. All right. So I've talked a lot about the Mavic Mini. You might be tired of hearing me go on about it, but hey, I'm going to talk about this guy a lot because it is a fantastic drone. It's small, it's tiny, it's capable, it has a really good camera, but it's not cheap. It's not super expensive, but still you're looking at like the base model at being $400. That's the drone and one battery and the controller, of course. But what you really want when you buy that is to get the Fly More kit, to get the extra batteries, the case, the charger, and you know, all this stuff you're going to want, because that one battery thing is going to get old quick. I mean, you're going to get up and fly for a short time, and you know, so the Mavic Mini is awesome. It might be a little more than you want to start with, though. So where do you go? Do you go get one of those cheapo drones? Well, what if you can avoid it? What if you can get a lesser expensive drone, but still get some quality and still start off learning some good habits of how to fly? Well, a couple years ago, DJI partnered up or somehow formed a relationship with a company called Rise, R-Y-Z-E. And now Rise had developed a tiny, and I mean really tiny drone, but still kept a lot of quality baked in there. Enough to impress DJI that they've sort of partnered up, and DJI sells these, and I'm sure they partner some technologies there. So I want to introduce you to Tello. You ever seen one of these? It's tiny, and this is again one of those things where people think, well, it's a little thing, so it's a toy. Not necessarily so. This guy has a lot of sophisticated, high-quality stuff baked into it, not only from the hardware perspective, but also software and firmware and flight controls. So let's talk a little bit about it before I tell you how much it is. Now let's compare size. Now, you already know how small the Mini is, right? What do you think? Let me get a better grip to give you a more accurate comparison. Really big difference, right? If I had the Air 2 out here, it would look mammoth next to the Tello. The Tello is a little tiny guy. It only weighs 80 grams. It's really small. The props, the impellers, for those of you, are 3 inches. So it's a small drone. But that doesn't mean it can't do some pretty interesting work. It has an Intel processor. It's got a high-powered processor on here to manage some pretty good flight control. It has downward-facing sensors that can detect the floor as it's coming into land. And I'll tell you about something else that helps here in just a second. It is easy to swap out batteries. They just pop straight out of the back of the chassis, and see how easy it is? Pops straight in. And it doesn't come with a controller, like a proper controller like you'd be used to. It flies from the app right on your phone, or you can use a tablet too. The tablet's a little bigger to hold, but you have a bigger view. But you fly it right off the app, off your phone. What it does is when you power it on, it creates its own little Wi-Fi network. You connect, you join that network, and open the app, and you take off flying. It does not have an SD card or any onboard storage for your data. It streams that right back to your phone, so it stores it in your Photos app. So that makes your data right there and easily accessible. So pretty cool stuff so far, right? All right, so what does it not have? What does it not do? Well, it does not have a gimbal, for one thing. Remember, we've talked about gimbals, particularly a 3-axis gimbal versus a 1-axis or 2-axis. A 3-axis, how that stabilizes the image quality of your video and also gives you some control over that. Well, this does not have a gimbal. The camera is right up front and it's fixed. So it is pretty much at the mercy of the altitude of the drone and attitude of the drone, depending on if it's flying forward and pitching down or whatever. That's going to determine your field of view of your image. But that's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, you're not going to be flying this thing a million miles in the air. You're not going to be flying it, way far away either. It's not got that kind of range. So for something with just close or tight shots or practice, or I use this for scouting out shots. Like if I'm just wanting to look at, say, I don't know, a shot of a house or an entryway or a walkway or something that I know I'm going to go back and get the final shot with, I can put this up and just kind of mess around with it. It's almost like you would sketch something before you do the final painting. This is sort of the first step, and I can play around with it because it's small and nimble and easy to fly, and there's almost no setup. I mean, you take it out of the case, you push the power button on the side, open the app on your phone, and boom, you're in the air. So it's quick and easy to use for something like that. It's very unobtrusive. Okay, the camera. A little bit about the camera. It's a 5-megapixel camera. It shoots in JPEG. It does not shoot in RAW, but it shoots pretty darn good images. Really not bad images. The video shoots in 720 at 30 frames per second. Again, not the highest in the world, but if you're just going to do a project for maybe social media, you're going to throw something on YouTube, or you're not needing that high of a resolution, it's not bad. Now, you probably noticed the prop guards that protect the props. Okay, it comes out of the box with those on. They do pop off if you don't want to use them. I recommend leaving them on. It's so small, you're probably going to be inclined to fly in tighter spaces, so it doesn't hurt to have them on. Because even though these props are small, they'll still whack your finger. They're moving fast. All right, so where else would something like this be handy? Give you a second to think about it. Time's up. Indoors. Not bad for indoor shots because it is small and moves very smoothly with the app on your phone. But remember, I talked about these downward position sensors. That helps it monitor its distance from the ground or the floor, and that helps stabilize the flight indoors. So that's another advantage to that. All right. So, got a little intro to the Tello. Intro to Tello. So, what does this beast run? What does it cost? What's it going to set you back? $99. $99. Not under $100. And that brings you the aircraft itself and one battery. You can add extra batteries. I have a couple extras. I think they're about 15 or 17 bucks, something like that. They're not too much. And I got that. I got a little hard case, and I just carry everything around in it. I mean, it's super small. So for not a lot of money, you can get into flying. Now we're going to take a look here in a minute at what the control screen looks like, so you can see how similar it's laid out to using a proper controller with the virtual sticks on the screen, yet some of the management options are laid out in a very similar way. It's not as complex, it's not as complicated as like the DJI Fly app and the DJI Go apps, but it makes it, again, easy to fly and very efficient, because there's sort of that blurry line between it's easy but then it's efficient. It gets you to the point, lets you get your work done quick and easy, like that. Now I will say, for fun too, this comes in the app with some pre-programmed flight modes that you may find useful. It does not have object tracking or active track or anything like that, but it sort of mimics it with a couple of those things. Like there's one that does a circle where the drone will fly in a circle with the camera pointed inward. So if you needed to do like an orbit around something, it's not going to lock onto that subject. It doesn't have those type sensors and all that built in. But if you can roughly line it up around a central subject, it will fly a circle around it and shoot your video, or you can shoot stills or whatever that way. And there's a few other things kind of along those lines. And for fun, it's got one where it'll do flips and some tricks. But if you do, say, start with a Tello, and you decide you outgrow it, and you're going to go into something like a Mavic Mini or Mavic Air 2, what do you do with this? Well, again, I use mine. I still, it's in the fleet. I use it. But if you want to pass it along, these are also sort of geared and marketed with kids in mind, with young people out there, because, as you know, drones are just exploding, and the future is extraordinarily bright for drone technology, not only in film but in so many areas. And there is a technology called Scratch, which is a programming language that is combined with the Tello, that allows you or whoever, again, it's primarily an educational thing, to build little pre-programmed flight things, kind of like that orbit thing I was talking about and the flipping. It lets you build these little scripts like that to make the drone do certain tasks. So it introduces this drone programming to people that are interested in pursuing something like that from a programming perspective. So if you have kids, you outgrow the Tello, you can pass it down, and it's a learning tool. They even make an education pack for the Tello. It runs a little bit more. I think it's like $129. And then if you're an Iron Man fan, they have a special Iron Man edition, which comes in the maroon and gold and all that stuff. So it's got some fun stuff, but it is a cool toy sized drone. See, if I was going to say it's a cool toy drone, it's a cool toy sized drone without being a toy. It is a real legit aircraft that can do some work. So again, if you're thinking about staying on a budget, but you want to get started and learn some good habits and get out there and just start flying, $100, I mean, come on, it's not a huge investment, and it can do a lot. So I love mine. I mean, I love all my drones, but it fits in my gear kit, and I love it. So anyway, let's take a look at some other stuff here as far as the controls go. We're going to look at some pictures and video and stuff, and take it from there. Okay, here I'm just going to show you kind of the simple interface that is the app to fly the Tello. Now what you're looking at is the screen on my iPad mini, and as you can see, there's not a whole lot of clutter here because, again, there's not a ton of stuff, not a lot of adjustments and complication here to fool with. Let's start at the bottom left corner. You see that that one stick control kind of virtual joystick there on the left. That controls, just like any other drone, your movement of the drone, whether it be up, down, yaw to the left, yaw to the right. And the one over in the far right corner, far right lower corner, controls the forward, back, and left-right motion, not yawing left and right, but moving left or right. So those operate sort of like virtual joysticks. And as you can see, as you move around on it, it has that little green indicator to sort of spell out what you're doing. And even the little circle in the middle, sort of like the top of the joystick, moves around to correspond with it. So that's pretty cool. So let's jump up to the top here. Now, this is how you would take off. So it's pretty easy if you want to do an automatic takeoff, which would be where you would just set the Tello on the ground, and you would slide this switch over, and we're indoors right now, so I'm not taking off. So you would just slide this over, the Tello is going to take off and hover. So really easy there to take off. Now the next one over, the icon up at the top left that looks like sort of the silhouette of the Tello, the second button over, this goes into those flight modes. And this is where it gets really cool. You have the throw and go, which lets you just basically toss it up in the air, and it automatically detects that it's in the air instantly and hovers right in place. So that's really cool. But we have some of these other things, these 8D flips, and that means it can flip in 8 different directions. It can flip forward, it can flip backwards, left, right, but also diagonally. So if you do the math, that counts up to 8 different directions that it can do flips. It's kind of a fun thing to do. The up and away, I mentioned that, it sort of starts at a one point and begins to back away while rising. So again, it doesn't have a gimbal, so we don't have sophisticated object lock and things like that, but you can still get a pretty cool effect out of that. Now the 360 is a cool thing. That is where it will spin in place. So if you think of that compared to the circle you see right next to it, it's doing 2 different types of a rotation. The 360 would be like if the drone, the camera was mounted, say, on a tripod, and it's fixed in place and it's spinning around 360 degrees looking outward. So it kind of gets that panorama view going around. Now, compare that with the circle, it's just kind of the opposite. The drone's going to fly a circle around a fixed point in the middle. So it's going to keep the camera pointed at the center of that circle. Again, it does not have object lock, so it's not going to lock onto a person or a building or a car or anything like that. It's just going to know the center point of its flight path and keep the camera pointed at that as it goes around. Bounce mode, it's fun, it's goofy. I mean, it doesn't do a whole lot except the drone bounces up and down. It will use those object detection sensors on the bottom, and once it detects that it's getting close to a certain floor, it will bounce up off that floor. So it's kind of fun. I mean, you can have it flying around and put your hand under it and bounce it up and down, and it stays, a foot or two above your hand, and it just follows your hand up and down, and it bounces up and down. So that's some of the fun flight modes. But as I mentioned, Scratch programming is available for this. So there are other programming modes that you can build into this. I haven't worked with them. From what I've seen, they're all along the same lines. I mean, you can create these little scripts for the drone to do a certain task like that. Not really super sophisticated, like flying waypoint missions and things like that. Because again, we don't have a real long flight distance with this guy. Now the third icon over, the one that looks like sort of a gear wheel, you might be surprised at some stuff in here. Again, it's kind of simple. We don't have a whole lot of stuff, but there's some cool stuff in here. We can adjust our flight speed from slow to fast, which again is for fun mostly, and this little guy will fly pretty fast. So if you are in a good open space and you want to kind of get a feel for faster control and things like that, you have it here. But look right below that, VR. If you have, and I don't have it powered up now so you can't see, but if you have a set of the smartphone VR goggles where you slip your phone in, it will do a split screen to give you that VR immersion of flight. So that's pretty surprising to come out of a model in this range. Bluetooth controller settings, if you add the Bluetooth controller, this is where you go to set that up, or if your game controller works with it, you'll find out here. Now, as I mentioned, it creates its own Wi-Fi network. So you can come in here and set a custom name and password for that. And under more, this is where we get in and do some customizing. We can decide if we want to use metric or imperial measurements. The photo quality, we can adjust from normal to high. I think that was added later. I don't think that was on the initial release. So that's been one of those things that gets bumped up in the firmware updates. Another reason to keep updated with your firmware. Low battery warning, obvious good safety thing there. The stick mode is mode 1 versus mode 2. Mode 2 is the most common mode to fly in. That's where the left stick controls the altitude and the yaw, the rise and descent and the yaw left and right, and the right stick controls the direction, forward and back, or moving left and right. EV is your exposure value for your camera, so you have a little adjustment there. And the bit rate, that's for your streaming. I just leave it on auto, and that makes that easy. Tapping on down here, we can get under the hood somewhat. If we need to update the firmware, if we need to calibrate the IMU, these are things you shouldn't have to do all that often, but it is important to keep that firmware updated because there may be new features, there may be safety things built in, there could be modifications to the battery programming that gives you a bit better battery life or efficiency. So a lot of things like that are found under here. It tells you the versions you're running now and all that kind of stuff. You can even contact support from here. So that is really about all there is in the settings to wrangle with. Over to the far right, we see 3 more buttons, kind of self-explanatory. We have a camera in the middle there that lets us flip back and forth between the still camera and the video camera, and the shutter button. And so again, not really complicated, not hard to see, not a whole lot of stuff to dig around. This is why it makes for a really good entry-level drone to get started. And again, you can use this thing to get some decent images and stuff you can clean up and possibly use in your productions. I'm not saying this is all you're going to need to go out and start shooting amazing video for your film. It's not, but this is going to be a good starting point and an extra tool to have in your toolkit to go out and, again, if you just need to go out and sort of scout shots out and things like that, it's not a bad drone for that. But again, some things to keep in mind. Don't put it up in windy conditions. Think of it as more of a lower altitude thing, or even indoors. And it's an excellent learning tool. Believe it or not, I've had mine for about 2 years now, and it's going strong. So it's not a piece of junk by any means, and it's a really good price point. So anyway, I hope you might consider the Tello. It's a great point. If you have any questions or anything about it, you can always contact me.